Everybody, welcome to Smooth Finish. And today, actually, we are being joined by NESPA and their show. We're collaborating New Depths. So that's their podcast. And we're getting a few of the guys from NESPA. And of course, our group is getting together again today. What we really want to share is how our organizations work together, our affiliations. Talk a little bit about kind of how we got started together and how we have been working together along both in education at each other's shows, bringing ideas together and problems that maybe the local area is dealing with in plaster in the Northeast. And of course, us bringing kind of what we know from around the country and bringing that information to the Northeast so they can see and hear what people are doing with plaster all over the place. There's a unique thing that we've been working together for about a few years now, which is a task force that we're doing with a problem that arose and that really was seen in the Northeast, identified, and that NPC's been, supporting and working with and trying to help identify and work through. And then of course, we'll talk about. I've always said NESPA is one of the greatest shows in the industry, if not the greatest. Sorry, everyone, but that's my personal thought. And of course, our conference, the NPC conference, and what we'll have to offer coming in the late winter, early spring of 2022. So without further ado, we have back, of course, with us, Mr. Chris Marcano. Chris, welcome back.
Greetings, everybody. It's great to be here on another discussion. Especially, I'm really excited about today, too. We're going to celebrate a historic and very powerful partnership between these two organizations. So a lot of good stuff to talk about. And hopefully for you listeners out there, we're going to guide you to get you to benefit from some of the great programs and different opportunities that are out there from these organizations.
Yeah, it's going to be a great conversation. And Mr. Rob Romano.
Hey, guys, good to be back.
And then, of course, we have with us from NESPA, we got Dom Mondi, who's making a second appearance. Dom was great. And again, this kind of speaks to our affiliation. Basically, our first episode where we were really talking about COVID, and Dom shared a lot of the work that they did, within the industry locally to get people back to work, to get the industry working again. And really happy to have you back, Dom. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. And that feels like somehow both yesterday and forever ago, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I remember doing that. And then who knew that a year and a half later, you guys would be chugging along. You're doing a great job with this podcast. And I'm glad that we're able to come together here.
That's great. And then we have Mr. Chaz Bogardus. If I said that wrong, Chaz, correct me, but welcome.
Thanks for having me. Not the first time.
Hey, bonus points if you can spell the last name.
It's very easy to spell, easier to pronounce, but Mr. Romano had trouble last week. I know that.
Well, great. Well, Chris, why don't you lead us into the conversation? Talk about how we started working together, and let's just flow from there.
Yeah, it's funny. We do have this amazing partnership between the two organizations, and I think really that's bonded in common goals to elevate, enhance, educate the industry, and to really utilize the resources that are out there, create programs, and really get them and deliver them through these different channels. So there's really so much that we have in common. But I do want to kind of start just with a celebration essentially of the partnership, but specifically, it is crazy to think about what we've been through as an industry since the whole COVID, pandemic and all the changes that have come with that. And if you look back and reflect, it's pretty shocking when you actually think about how much we've changed, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. As an industry as a whole, there's been historic shortages, historic labor demand, issues and constraints, a huge spike in demand that we're talking about. And yet this industry, with the help of different organizations and the help of each other, from manufacturers to different groups to partnerships out there in the field between retailers, service companies, you name it, builders, we've just persevered and survived. And I think we're going to come out of this stronger. So it's pretty cool to celebrate with this group here because it all started a year and a half ago that our podcast started with essentially this group. And, you know, we've made it through the tough times, and we're going to continue to make it through the tough times. So having said all that, Dom, Chaz, welcome to the show. I do want to kind of dig in. Would you just for our listeners, as if there's any crossover here of folks that aren't familiar with what really, you know, from a high level, what is it that they can really benefit from that NESPA has to bring to the table?
Yeah. So, and I'm going to ask you to do the same thing, because that's what's great about doing what we're doing here, right? Is you have your membership or following, or people that are involved in your segment of the pool industry across the country. And we have our niche here in the Northeast. And as an association that brings together like-minded people involved in the same industry, there's a lot of things that we do, just as you do. We work around government affairs, right? Like that's so lobbying, right? Dirty word, but you know, it's lobbyists are like lawyers. You hate one unless you got one, right? and
you have a good one.
And you have a good one. So we do a lot in the industry to work in the Northeast on licensing initiatives, certification initiatives. We advise members around codes and standards, you know, so you're building a pool and the pool inspector's got a question and you're pretty sure you got it right, but you need some backup and supporting documentation and things like that. Call NESPA. We bring those resources to bear to help in the field. Sometimes it's a case of not understanding how a license works. We've got licensing for pool contractors in Connecticut and parts of New York and now in New Jersey. We work through those to make sure that our members are successful and the public understands what's going on. We obviously run education and training of all different kinds. There's online stuff. We've done webinars. We do classes here in our training center in Hamilton, New Jersey, wide ranging of topics that kind of hit the Northeast niche, right around seasonality. We do a lot of stuff around opening season, around winterization, which we're going to talk about quite a bit here today. So a lot of those communications, we publish a newsletter. So all the stuff that you would expect from a strong trade association, we bring to bear for the benefit of the pool industry here in the Northeast.
Yeah, and one thing that I've gotten, you know, one of the things that was glaringly obvious to me in just conversations and working with your folks over there, Dom, is the fact that there's a 100% genuine motivation and passion behind what you guys do, which is really, really apparent, you know, and it's very it's overwhelmingly obvious, right, that you are there doing these things for the good of the industry as a trade organization. And really there's no such thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's an old cliche, but there's no such thing as a dumb question, because it's so easy to be out there with, especially now, everything's chaos, you know, a normal pool construction, a rehab, a refinish, everything's chaotic now. There's a sense of urgency from the customer. You don't know what's coming in from where or what time or how, you know, the products, and everything's just heightened these days.
Right.
And it's easy to become overwhelmed or uncertain about a certain item, you know, like one little caveat to a job. And I think it's really valuable to know that there's a resource like NESPA where somebody out there can actually just reach out and get clarification, get guidance, get some direction. And it doesn't matter how big or small really the issue is. You're going to do what you can to help that business owner or that member of the industry.
Yeah, and that's exactly how we, you know, sometimes some will get contacted and the answer isn't exactly what you wanted to hear, but at least you're clear, right? There's the code reference, there's whatever you need to know, like, okay, this is the right way to do it. And it's not just that, that's a technical side, right? That's how we interface with government and then interface with our members and interface with the standards and regulations. But we always think about our, you know, membership kind of wide, right? We've got builders, we've got service companies, we've got retailers, we've got distributors, et cetera. But it's also vertical as far as we've got people who've been in the industry for 3 or 4 years versus companies that are on their 3rd generation. And so in that way, it's not just always the technical reference. I mean, part of what makes NESPA such a great organization is the community. And you sort of alluded to this, right? That there's a lot of camaraderie. We've got four local chapters. Rob's on the board of our Connecticut chapter. So you have these local connections that come together in the region. You know, obviously everybody doesn't know each other, but it kind of feels that way. So if we don't have the answer from a technical sense. Chances are we could say, you know what, you should contact this guy, or, hey, Rob, call Chaz. I think he had a similar problem last week. And a lot of our members build those relationships on their own through things like the Pool and Spa Show, or coming to trainings, or going to our Congress of Committees event, or things like that. So that's a big part of why we're here, not just the technical side, but to build that community in the industry.
Absolutely. And that is definitely apparent. Now, one thing that we've mentioned several times is the education component. And I wanted to kind of throw out, just for the listeners over here, I don't want to sit there and say itemize everything that you have that you're excited about, but from a 10,000 foot level, are there any things that stand out to you in this upcoming season? Because I can tell you right now, as an industry, we are brimming ready for the show come January. It is overdue. We are ready and willing and able to go and intermingle with people safely, of course. But what are some, from educational standpoint, what are some of the highlights and things that you have cooking for this upcoming show?
Well, before you start, I'm a little anxious to know what a Chris Marcano is ready for a show compared to other years when you were not. So that would be something that I would be a bit concerned about.
Yes, for listeners out there who aren't familiar with myself, I do bring a high level of energy to shows typically. So thank you, Chess. Thank you. That's awesome. No stress, right? No stress. No.
Is there video? Because I heard there was a chicken suit at one point. I don't know.
There's plenty of pictures. I got a phone full of pictures.
We'll be getting a backdrop change on.
Most of these images, folks, are PG-13, and they are taken.
Indeed.
They can be easily taken out of context, right? So. Yes, and yes, for the record, there was a chicken. It's on many social media. It wasn't a live. It was a woman in a chicken costume. Let's keep our heads out of the gutter here, folks. This is a family show, a professional show. But chicken suits aside, what do we have to look forward to at the show this year?
While I can promise there will be chicken suits at this year's education conference again, by last count, I think we have 106 right now individual. That number will fluctuate a little bit between now and the show. Educational programs at the conference, and the conference component of the show is really, it's grown so much over the years and become such a driving force of the Pool and Spa Show's success. And I bring up the number because it's not just about the quantity, it's the diversity within that, right? So from whether you're, a second generation owner, or you're a service tech who's never been to the show before and your boss is bringing you along, there are pieces of the program that are built for you. So there's basic water chemistry, advanced water chemistry, and a few other niche chemistry type classes. There's construction related classes. We've got both Genesis and Water Shapes University coming in to do both short and long form programs, industry certifications, including and especially NPC's startup certification is on the agenda again this year, and always has a great turnout at the show. And it's a great opportunity to bring that program to the Northeast, especially at the timing, right? The last week of January is you're getting pretty close to needing your guys trained to get ready, because once the weather breaks here, there's no time to train, you got to go, right? So the timing is really great for that. So we've got a lot of programs. The format's changing a little bit in that we're going to spread the programs throughout the day a little bit more, so that we can, to use your word, safely, if we need to, kind of make sure that the crowds aren't too dense. But all the programs, nothing's changing as far as the number of programs, the types of programs, everything everybody's come to expect. We're also bringing the training wall back again. That's our on-floor, hands-on. It's on the exhibit floor. There's some scheduled classes, hands-on classes there. We've done tile classes before, heater service classes, and all of our big partners in the industry always show up with something new to demonstrate. So you bring your guys, they can check it out, they can get their hands dirty, they can twist the wrench themselves, so to speak, and see how things work and go together.
I've always been impressed by that, that what would you call it? That event, that feature of the show, because it is so, it's, people are people, and a lot of folks out there will have commitment issues, right? And so someone doesn't want to commit to a whole class, but, having the opportunity and that kind of outreach at the show on the floor where they can simply walk up and have a conversation. And to your point, Dom, touch a wrench, like to actually physically do the task. I mean, that is one of the best ways to actually learn a skill, is to physically do it. Right? I can tell people about, this or that or the other thing all day, but to have them and guide them to do the activity or to do the task, that's what sticks. So I've always really been impressed with that, and I think it's really outside of the box thinking and an action that really has some impact. So anybody out there that's gonna, I highly recommend you attend the show. Obviously, the Atlantic, the pool show is the one to go to. It's just the education alone is just, it's a stage like no other. And if you do go, be sure to stop by and look at that wall and see exactly what's offered there, because it is a pretty cool thing.
Chris, if I can jump in there, some of the things that when you develop the wall and the things that you're trying to touch on, years ago, we built, it was that equipotential bonding grid. So we built the pools to show everybody what's getting bonded and how all that worked, and had something explained in that. And then the heater classes, I'm sure you guys see it all the time. You go into somebody's backyard, and instead of them swapping the header on a heater so that the inlet outlet are on the left side, they got pipe going behind the heater and then back up again, as opposed to just switching the header, which is something that's simple to do. But at the same time, if you've never done it before, right, to have the opportunity to break down a heater right on the floor and swap the header from one side to the next. It's just a really simple thing, but it's those kinds of things that are that I don't think get taken advantage of enough. I know my guys, when I send them, it's like, hey, get involved. Did you go to the wall? Did you do this? And some guys, unfortunately, they don't want to just jump in because other people were watching, but there's just really a huge opportunity to jump in and talk to those people and pull out, whatever questions you might have as you're going through that. It's there and designed for that. And I wish it got used more. I wish there was more participation, and really getting into it.
Yeah, and so on that point too, one of the coolest things about it is again, this isn't a necessarily an agenda, a preset script that's being dictated to you, that's being regurgitated to you. This is organic, true craftsmen, true professionals, masters of the trade that are exchanging ideas and practices and tips. And that is, again, how we perfect the craft, whether it's tile application or awareness and insight into bonding practices and things like that. I mean, you name it, it's going to be discussed potentially there. And again, there's different ways to do things, but when you do them, not only the most effective, efficient, and professional installs out there when it comes to, whether it's a finish or installing a heater, that's going to resonate, and that's going to give the entire industry that little lift that has plagued it for some time. I mean, how many nightmare horror stories have we all seen of installations or things gone wrong? If you go to any of the social media pages right now from our industry, especially the homeowner based ones, it's all these nightmare horror stories, right? They're just out there, and so much of that comes from lack of institutional knowledge when it comes to a lot of the installation. There's some bad apples out there, and this is a great way to help us overcome that stigma that a pool is a negative thing. And I think we're well on our way, but it's just really, it is exciting. So again, if you haven't, go see the wall. You won't regret it. Good people and great ideas.
Yeah, and that's, that whole stigma thing is exactly why associations like ours and NPC exist, right? Because without any sort of organized framework to get to identify professionals and then continue their growth, it's a little bit of a crapshoot. When everybody in a certain membership, like to join NESPA, for example, right? Anybody can join. If you're a legal company, you have to have your whatever credentials you need, whether it's a license or a home improvement contract or certification or whatever. You have to have a reference and things like that. Now, that doesn't guarantee you're building the best pools that could possibly be built. But you start to create some kind of floors and some kind of guardrails around what's going on. And then the people that you're mingling with when you're in association functions, you take with a little more credibility maybe than just the guy 3 doors down that built a pool that's now caving in, right?
That's exactly right. And we've all heard those stories. Let's shift gears just slightly, but speaking of the show, one thing that we collectively started working on, and it was really an across the industry pool of folks that weighed in on this, was the creation and the implementation of the Winter Effects Task Force. Let's talk about that, and that's going to be a good segue, because in another conversation with this group, we are going to talk about winterization and some really exciting new ideas and concepts when it comes to that. But one thing that kind of came out of necessity, I should say, was this Winter Effects Task Force. So I'm going to throw this over to you, Dom and Chaz, and Rob, feel free to jump in as well. We've all been part of it, but kind of walk us through, and the listeners, through the beginning of this Winter Effects Task Force that was created.
So I'm going to let Chaz, who's one of the co-chairs, along with the honorable and reputable Kyle Shaken. But the funny anecdote about your question, when did this start, is it actually started in San Diego at an NPC conference 1 week after I started at NESPA.
That's right.
Was on a conference call because I couldn't get to San Diego on that short notice, and had no idea who Rob Romano, Chaz Bogardus, Kyle and Chris Marcano, or anybody else involved was. But we decided then that NPC and NESPA had a shared interest here, a problem that was shared by our members, both in the plastering and related communities across the entire northern climate ultimately of the country. And whether you were a builder, or in a lot of cases in our membership, it was the service company that was discovering this. In some cases, when they did their opening in the spring, even if they hadn't installed the pool. So shared problem, which I'll let someone smarter than me describe for everybody here in a technical way. But yeah, it's exactly where we saw an overlap. Decided to pool resources in time, talent, and treasure to try and come up with a solution, or at least come up with a better understanding of what the issue at hand was. And the issue at hand was, Chaz.
So one of the buttons that was made up years ago was got scale. And the problem, if you guys remember it at the show, and what was getting discussed is you open up a pool in the springtime, and it can be from something you can't see and almost feel like sandpaper to the salt that would be on a Philly soft pretzel, where it's just big scale that's coming out. And the idea was, what is causing that? And industry wide, there's, you can categorize 3 different groups. You actually have the pool builder, then you actually have the applicator, and then you have the service company. So what unfortunately was happening is you had each different segment potentially pointing the finger at another one. And the idea behind this was to let's eliminate that and find out what the problem is and what we need to do. And there was no better way than to getting all of those people together, right? So getting NPC together with the builders and the service companies alike, to try and figure out, hey, why is this happening? And really started with a lot of dialogue in reference to, what's causing the outcome? What is it this? Is it, plastering laid? Is it, all different dynamics across the board to just figure out what it was that was causing this. And it really got simplified. And the starting point where Greg Garrett at the time, he was real big on. He's like, we can't figure out what the problem is until we know what it actually is. And that was where it started to start getting samples of the material. So getting a sample of what the scale was, and we've done a lot to that with different packs of information that we can give you to tools and bags and sample things to send off to get tested. And that was the intention, was to get the material, have the material analyzed, and then from the analyzation of what we're getting, then come out with a potential next step to whether it's prevent or at the same time you have it, how are we getting rid of what's there? And there was a couple different forms of scale that were coming up, and some were significantly harder to get off than others. And that's really where this started. And I know Greg used to refer to this as a crystalline deposit, and wouldn't call it scale because you weren't really sure where that went. But the word scale, I think, is conglomerately grabs a bunch of, or a broader area. So that's how it really started, and it really it did start to take off in a pretty strong way. And I definitely think COVID definitely did not help us each of the last 2 years in getting things together, because it just, under a normal pool season, normal opening closing season where you don't have COVID, it's hard enough to try and work on these little things that are in the smaller majority of the pools that we're opening, right? But then it's just, we just haven't gotten the samples or enough test information to really come and draw a real good conclusion.
Yeah, and so this is still a work in progress, and this is essentially an ask of us, on this task force, to the listening audience out there within the industry, is that we do still need these samples of this mystery scale. And a lot of people say, well, what's it look like? What's it? And as Chaz said, it has a couple of different physical appearances, but the bottom line, and I think it was Kyle that said this, Kyle Chaikin, who said, when you have it, and you'll know, right? It is a hard, strange, abnormal, and for the listeners out there, I'm doing the air quotes, it is not a typical scale formation, but typically it appears or manifests after a closing period of the winter season, right?
It's generally with a new application done midway or later in the year, and so it's something directly related to that. And after we close the pool in the springtime, these crystalline deposits form on the pool surface, and like to Chaz's point, it can be invisible. It could look like the old dots that you look, the candy that we had as kids, and or it looks like Rice Krispies are deposited on a pool wall. I've seen some crystals that look like Superman's fortress. I mean, these things are grown out to look like a spaceship as he's crashing with Christopher Reeves back in the day, So there's a lot of different crystal formations, and they all tend to be the same. From the samples that we get, they point to the same element, which is a form of calcium carbonate. But they're forming in different ways, and some, again, just to repeat what Chaz said, some are easy to come off, some you need to grind off, and it's those ones that we need to grind off. We really, because that's money for the service company, for the homeowner, for something they've already spent a decent amount of money on to have a new finish put in, and then I got to spend more to get this off. So whatever help you guys can give would be fantastic.
Yeah, so I will throw this out there.
Want to get to the next step.
What is the process to where a service professional, a builder, can reach out and essentially be empowered to be a forensic investigator on the behalf of this task force? You can be a junior G-man or woman by simply reaching out. We're going to send you a forensic testing kit. How can anyone help us out in this quest for the truth?
You'll be deputized into our.
That's right. Get your badge.
I'll say this, and we'll see if, however the episode gets published, if we can add into the notes or whatever the specifics. But basically, we can send you a sample collection kit. It's not a test kit, a sample collection kit, or you can do it on your own as well. But the idea is we have plastic sealable bags with scrapers. We don't need a huge sample. Please don't send me a 5-pound bag of calcium. But you scrape down into the water against the wall and try and loosen up enough of those crystals. The best way to do it is to hold the bag below, scrape slowly, and as they come off the wall, they will float down into the bag. It's okay if they're wet. It's okay if you get water in the bag, but at least a couple tablespoons worth of crystals is what we need to analyze. You seal that, you send it to NESPA's headquarters, which is at 6B South Gold Drive in Hamilton, New Jersey. Again, we'll put that information out there, and it's also on our website. All of these details are on our website as well, nespapool.org under Winter Effects Task Force. And we send it off to a lab. We run a chemical analysis, an elemental analysis to understand what the makeup is, see if there's any trace elements in it. Like Rob said, we're pretty consistently seeing that it's a calcium carbonate. I think one of the big questions is going to be not so much what it is, but how it's formed. And that's exactly what we're working towards. But the broader sample size we have, both in number of samples and in where the samples come from, the more we can start to either isolate anomalies or find some through lines.
Yeah, and any collective help is really appreciated as we work, as an industry towards a solution to this very, very strange and unique phenomenon out there that's occurring. So we're really close, and we're gaining information on this with every sample that's collected. So any help, listeners, that you can provide for this act, any action you can take, any samples you can provide, it's extremely beneficial for the industry as a whole. So we really appreciate any help on that part.
And there's
So
no cost. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yes, no cost.
Sending the kit out for free. You send it back to us. We're analyzing it for free. Understand? I mean, obviously there is a cost, but that's why we are, working with PHTA, the NPC, and obviously NESPA to offset those costs. I mean, we have the research money there to do this.
Yep.
The only thing that we don't have that we need is people to give us the samples. That's what it is. There's no cost. You then get analyzation results back, so you guys know exactly what it was. So it's helpful, but there is no cost for you, just the cost of figuring out how to get it and get it to us.
This is a northern state problem, so if you're down in Florida, sorry for the last 10 minutes, it doesn't really apply to you, but northern states for sure.
I think the emphasis there was winterization.
Never know.
If it's cold,
Never know.
This seems to be more common, much more common, where the water temperature does get below 32.
I just see Jay Eaton going, what are you guys even talking about?
So
Yeah, well, Dallas got some winterization last year.
Yeah.
Everything up. If you
Yeah.
remember.
we're going to talk about
See if
on
any
our next.
crystals there, right?
Yep, we're going to talk about that on our next episode. So just kind of winding this up, we've talked about
before you
educational-
land the plane, Chris, if I could, I want to just go
Oh, yeah.
back the other way, because one of the things that we wanted to do here, right, was have us from New Depths, NESPA's podcast, come on your show. And then also we wanted to be able to release this through as one of our episodes as well.
Absolutely.
So that our listeners might hear what's going on with Smooth Finish and with the NPC. So you asked us a lot of questions, and I just thought we should take a moment at least for the other direction and hear a little bit about what NPC does for its members. I realize a lot of your listeners know, but as I find with my organization, a lot of times I say things to people who are loyal, longtime members, and they go, "Oh, I didn't know you did that." So what's going on with NPC these days?
Or more
Brent,
importantly,
why don't you give us
how
a
about this, Chris?
360
Since we're
on the-
getting asked the questions now, what is it exactly that you do?
Chris does.
Meet Chris Marcano?
Oh yeah, you.
I think the better question would be what is it you don't do, really? I mean, that's what it boils down to. A lot of people ask me, they say, what is it you do? And I just tell them, I do my best. That's what I do. I do my best.
He tries. Got a pin.
I like to be a beacon of light when it comes to the transfer of education and institutional knowledge. No, Dom, actually, this is a great, I think this is a great point, and I think it's a great way to kind of to take this home. So Brent, would you walk us through for a starting point in this, like give us an overview of the conference, the NPC conference that's being held on February 9th and 11th. Sorry, February 9th and 11th in Buckhead.
Yeah, it's our 33rd conference in the Atlanta area. Obviously, like with you guys, education is really the NPCs. That's like kind of our what we want to do for the industry or bring the industry. We're a trade organization. We're pretty specific, but I think a lot of people grasped with the startup certification class. That was one of those things that kind of gave us, voice within the industry outside of our own four walls, let's say. And just to talk a little about what we're doing, we're working very hard right now on bringing more education out of our tech manual. So tech manual is there, it's available to all, but a lot of that is very foreign. Just like the reason that the way we start up a pool for plaster is completely different how a service guy or a builder wants to, I always say at the check getter, they want to clear that water up and get people swimming. But we have reasons to start it slower and to do it a certain way. And we've taught that a lot of that to the industry. In the same token, that's not obviously all we do. We don't, that's the last part of what we do. So we're Rob actually created a class, surface prep, and we brought a lot of what's in our tech manual. We put it together, and we talked about we always recognize there's a lot of ways to skin the cat. So we recognize the different ways, acceptable ways that fit within the parameters and standards of our tech manual. And we created that class, and we're teaching that to the industry now and looking to take that. And we have in a few cases. I think Robbie actually taught it at NESPA last year, the pool surface preparation, and just others, placement of product. Like most people maybe understand, but not really all the different techniques and the layers, and everything that goes into getting that plaster on correctly, the right thickness, the right mix, all the things that have to happen so you have a successful finish. So that's where, we have LMS classes coming along. They're being released. Actually, the startup class is now available on LMS. We're working to get the surface prep, a class that's available so people, not only learn the information, but make sure they're retaining it and give them something to take home, certification, if you will. And again, that is the drive right now. Really, a lot of what we're working on is that, of course, we bring those classes to our conference, and a lot like NESPA. We have business tracks. We have, just even if it's just insurance or just other things that matter to people. Sometimes it's just about how to treat customers. So those are always there. We do have this year pretty unique. We're going to do a full day. Let's call it, it's all by itself. It's 3 classes, and it's kind of start to finish, like a remodel primer. So approaching the pool, what are you looking for? What are going right into actually, everything that you need to do and finishing that pool, and just 3 courses kind of sequentially to walk people through that process. Our guys know a lot of that, but for builders that if they're going to start getting a remodel, or service guy who wants to offer remodel, this is going to be a great thing for them to come and sit through and kind of get an idea of how that all works and what they need to be looking for. So we'll have a total of 15 classes. There's 12 other classes with all different tracks. We try and do hands-on. We generally have a tile hands-on. We're going to do the good, the bad, and the ugly with surface finishes. We're going to have good samples, bad samples, those types of things. Just all sorts of classes in that scenario. We're looking this year to start kind of a young professionals, get some of the younger people. I think with a lot of the industry, you got the age out, right? You got the people that are there. Maybe their kids are coming along, but a lot of people, I always talk about, at one of our conferences where a very successful plasterer was saying, he don't want his kid anything to do in the industry. Go be a lawyer or a doctor, which I thought was interesting. But there is people entering the industry that we want to get involved. I think that's a great thing about both of our organizations is there's the volunteerism that really goes in. It's what's really behind the drive and the care is the people that will spend their free time trying to better the industry and become a part of a group. We always have our really great auction. There's some great opportunity there for people. That summit, we are doing a tour this year, the largest aquarium in the world, I believe, the Georgia Aquarium. That's a nice little feature event that we're doing. And really, I'd say, and I've always said this about our organization, is the networking and coming together with like-minded people and really understanding and asking the guy from another part of the country how he, protects from wind when it's windy outside or whatever the case may be, or just learning from the peers within the group and in the classroom, but really just that camaraderie that happens at the conference. That's very intimate. It's generally all held within one location, a hotel, and you can't really get away from people. So come and you know, and be a part of it. And I think you'll really gain a lot from it.
I've been to your conference, and the same thing we were talking about as far as community and camaraderie at NESPA is on such display within NPC as well. And the conference is probably the antithesis of that, where you know, it's the interesting thing, right? You're a national organization, and there's probably people who, if you ask them, they'd say, this is a good friend of mine who they only see in person once a year at your show, right? But they've built such a connection through the association, and now with Zoom and everything else, everybody connects all 1,000 ways. So I'm looking forward to Atlanta this year for sure. And that aquarium tour sounds pretty cool. I'd like to check that out.
Yeah.
And also, and the last thing I'll say that I've learned, we started this with the collaboration between our two organizations, and clearly, if I've learned nothing else, the cross point of NESPA and NPC is Rob Romano.
Well, we weren't going to tell him, but you know, Dom, now you've let him know. So,
well, great.
He's the glue that binds all things. He's like the piece of gum underneath that chair that can stick to anything.
Yeah.
Come on, Chris. He's the cement, man. This is the NPC. Come on.
That's right.
He's cement in the mix.
You know, being part of both organizations is, we have our great similarities, the networking, the friendships, the relationships, the education that both organizations put out. And I do have a unique position where sitting on both boards, being as active as I am on both boards, is being able to bringing what I see, the great stuff in NPC and seeing the great stuff at NESPA and making them work for each other is and bringing them together. Really, it's great. It's just great. It's great to be part of two awesome organizations.
No, I think that's fantastic. And Rob, you do a great job. So listeners out there, if you haven't booked, if you haven't made travel plans yet, be sure January 25th through the 27th, the Pool and Spa Show located in beautiful Atlantic City, New Jersey. And then of course, February 9th and 11th, the National Plasters Council's 33rd annual conference in Buckhead, beautiful Buckhead, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. So a fun time, a quality time to share ideas and to better your craft. So I really don't think, I think we are at a point where we have covered the topics. Brent, do you want to take us out?
Yeah, I do. I think we're experience a smooth finish, as we always generally do. Guys, Chaz and Dom, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And looking forward, as always, to NESPA and to our conference. And if you guys want to learn more about either, Dom, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's nespapool.org. And of course, you can find npconline.org for the NPC. Everybody, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.